We just got the third cinematic trailer for Poppy Playtime Chapter 4, and with it there are a bunch of little clues and secrets that I want to talk about, so grab a snack. You know what, maybe actually put the snacks down for this one. Hello everyone, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays and all that jazz. The latest trailer for Chapter 4 just dropped and it pretty much confirms that Harley Sawyer is going to be the main antagonist of Chapter 4 like we'd been speculating. But I think there are some things in this trailer that are even more interesting than that. I'm gonna have to keep this one brief because I have a little Christmas video that I'm working on that I really want to get out for Christmas Day, so let's get straight into it. The trailer shows us what looks like Harley Sawyer waking up from a deep sleep, although the very beginning of the trailer confirms my latest theory. The word rebooting strongly suggests that Harley Sawyer is actually in digital form. This is something I discussed in my latest theory that Playtime Co. could have done this alongside the toy experiments, the transfer of consciousness to a computer system. Now I actually talked about this with the scientists from Chapter 1, but this trailer not only proves that Playtime Co. were researching it, but now we can see that they did indeed succeed. Maybe there are even more staff in this digital form around the factory. Remember my theory about the make-a-friend machine? Not so far-fetched now, is it? But this word is interlaced with a phrase that has been a staple of the series. The word rebooting is shown alongside the phrase wake up. Now of course rebooting is basically the digital form of waking up, but it's very interesting that this is Poppy's phrase. This is something we've seen in several trailers now, and it's usually accompanied with Poppy's face or voice. Does this mean that Poppy is talking to Harley Sawyer here? Is she wanting to wake him up, or is she once again talking to us, the player? A really cool little detail here by the way, the mob logo briefly turns into a sketch form, like a child drew it. Pretty creepy, but also kind of suspicious timing since we've just found out that Kissy really likes to draw. Now we see that as Harley is waking up or rebooting, he's seeing the world through the lenses of cameras. This does make sense if he's in digital form, but it is kind of worrying. It seems like Harley is in the security systems, and I'm not so sure he's going to be helpful to us in Chapter 4. But the most interesting part about this concept is that many of these frames are shown to us in a fragmented and disorderly way. These are meant to represent his memories, and this is meant to show us how disorientated Harley was after the transfer process. Now this would make sense, taking a human mind and digitizing it would take a huge toll, and it would take a lot of processing. But there is a really interesting and kind of creepy concept being shown here too. Some of the CCTV images show a passage of time. You see the factory before and after the Hour of Joy. It almost looks like Harley Sawyer went to sleep before the Hour of Joy and only woke up after. Another cool little detail here, we see yet another Bonzo that appears to have met a horrific end. This has become a running joke with this character. Now this just opens up a whole can of worms. I am assuming that someone did this to Harley Sawyer as punishment for his involvement in the theatre incident. We get a little hint to that hidden in the trailer later. I don't think he did this to himself. He clearly talks about being betrayed and so on, and he's confused by his new form. But why did they do this to him instead of just outright killing him? Well, my guess is that since he was the one who spearheaded the research on the bigger bodies, they wanted to use that knowledge for themselves. If they killed him, then all that research would die with him. I highly doubt Sawyer was sharing that research with anyone else, but by keeping him in this form where they thought he was harmless, they could extract that data from him. But I guess the Hour of Joy really messed up those plans. Now mixed between frames all throughout the trailer we can see small snippets of what look like the surgeries that created the bigger bodies. It's already interesting to note that Harley mentions the bigger bodies here and refers to them as my creations, not only hinting to his own god complex, but showing just how little he cares for them. He only views them as his own accomplishments and no longer sees them as the children that they really are. But these surgery images do confirm a long-standing theory. In this one, we can see a human brain surrounded by blue fur. Yes, this is Huggy's creation, and now we have absolute confirmation that these living toys do contain a brain. This is something that I talked about back in Chapter 2, and it explains why Poppy's head is so big. It also explains why Mommy died when we put her in the grinder. A brain needs blood, blood needs to be pumped. While these bodies might have exceptionally strong skeletons, it's all held together by flesh and blood. But this also leads into a very interesting concept. Brains are organs just like any other. They can get sick, damaged, but most importantly they need sustenance. These experiments being held underground with no natural sunlight and a diet of, well if you think about it, cannibalism, no wonder these toys are slowly being driven mad. And that's before you even talk about all the trauma, the gas and so on. During these stills we see a rat that has been operated on. I actually talked about this recently, how the rat relates to the idea of immortality with the experiment file left on Elliot's desk, but this could be yet another metaphor for how Harley views these children as nothing more than his lab rats too. We also get a brief shot of the prototype, well, once again his hand. This time his fingers are outstretched, but he's surrounded by screens, which is very interesting. Again, is this a memory or something else? Now we see several of the bigger bodies looking at Harley. Again, these seem like Harley's fragmented memories, but I don't actually think they are looking at Harley. I think it's more likely that they are looking at the cameras. You can even see the reflection of one in Yarnaby's eye. But since we now know that Harley is inside the security systems, well, it means that he can see absolutely everything that's going on inside the factory. Remember, the cameras are everywhere. And if Harley did wake up before we got here, then he might have been watching us this entire time. Which would also make sense since Harley was the one who narrated the story so far videos. See, he's been watching us all along. Another interesting detail is these title cards that are most likely meant to represent Harley's thoughts. They show titles with background subtext, which is probably meant to show that Harley now thinks like a computer rather than a man. But the most interesting part about these is that they are all inverted. Once again, metaphorically, this is telling us that Harley Sawyer's world has been flipped. One of these title cards shows the phrase, "I think, therefore I am." This is a translation of a quote by French philosopher René Descartes, and it's loosely the idea that if you can think, or indeed doubt yourself, then you are therefore proving that you exist. This comes from the idea that our brains are sculpting our reality. Everything we experience is just our brain's interpretation of it. We now know it's just chemical reactions between neurons. Therefore, in a philosophical sense, it's really difficult to prove that anything actually exists. Does the sun shine, or do we just perceive that it does? Imagine the Matrix. Does our world exist, or do we just think that it does? Look at this when it's inverted and tell me that's not Matrix-like. Well, this was where Descartes had the idea that if you are thinking, then you certainly do exist. After all, how can you doubt what exists unless you yourself do exist? But this is really interesting. If you think about it in terms of Sawyer, his mind is now essentially digital. You could argue that the man Harley Sawyer now no longer exists, but he is showing that he himself is having these existential thoughts. Therefore, Harley Sawyer has just proved that he does still exist. His mind not only survived the transfer process, but he is continuing to think independently. Quite a deep theme from such a simple phrase here. But then this could also tie into one of my longest standing theories. In my first ever Poppy Playtime theory, I proposed the idea that we ourselves could be a toy. Well, we also have seen this wake up messaging happening since chapter 1, and in chapter 3, Poppy tells us that we don't even know what's real anymore. This idea now being brought up with Harley Sawyer could be another clue that what we are seeing is not entirely the truth. At this point, who knows how much of this is even real? Perhaps we are one of those experiments and we are trapped in some sort of dream. Just something to think about. It's also kind of creepy that we see hopscotch in the prison area. Now I'm not sure if this was put here before or after the Hour of Joy, but if it was before, then that means that there were children being held down here. Why would children be held in a prison? I mean, what could they possibly do that would justify that? But it's probably more likely that these were here for the toy experiments. After all, they were still children, and I'm sure that not all of them were released into other parts of the factory. The failures, the smaller toys, they would need a place to live, and we know that they are potentially dangerous. But we once again saw this before. We have seen these toys being held in rooms, and I bet this was the area we saw in the Bron VHS tape. Now this image is very interesting. It shows what looks like a grab pack hand prototype on a desk with a fancy looking mural in the background. I already talked about the hand symbolism in my latest video, but this grab pack hand makes me wonder. It looks like a red and blue hand. Now I wonder if these were special grab pack hands that the higher up staff had access to, ones that could open any door, a master hand if you will. It would make sense that the higher ups would have a way to get anywhere in the factory, since I have previously talked about the idea that the grab pack door locks were a way to make sure that no single staff member could get everywhere. And you know what? Screw it, it's Christmas. This mural is showing just how important Huggy is to the company, which is just more evidence that he will return. We also get this still of Huggy, which makes him look like he's attacking with both his arms and legs. Looks kind of silly, but look where he is. Those are the same catwalks from chapter 1, the ones he fell from. I'm saying it, mob are really teasing me if this isn't more evidence. Now there is even a very slim chance that we see Huggy one final time in this trailer. This part shows something that is really hard to make out. Honestly, I'm not absolutely sure what it is, but this shape does kind of look like a Huggy mouth, except it's very green. Now what's really interesting about that is that in this image with Yarnaby on either side, you can see what kind of does look like a blue and a green Huggy. It's a long shot, but we do know that Playtime Co. made a bunch of different coloured Huggies, so perhaps there were more than just the blue Huggy and Kissy. Now, speaking of things I can't figure out, there is a very brief flash of this image. Now, my only real guess is that this could be a view from the inside of a cell. This could be the little window that you usually see on them. But then, what's this? Is this supposed to be a person? Is this the cell opposite? Is it a door? Honestly, I have no clue, but it's just kind of there. Now, around this time, Harley talks about being nowhere and everywhere, which again makes sense if his mind is digital. But in that subtext, we can see him thinking, I can use it. Now, what exactly is it? I actually think it refers to this machine that we've seen a snippet of alongside the eye. This machine, which I'm going to nickname the Lazarus machine for now, but I think this is how Playtime Co. managed to digitize Harley, and again, perhaps even more staff. But as I said in my last video, there may be a way to reverse this process. I think this machine is going to be a key part of the story going forward, and I think this is what Harley is referring to. The trailer wraps up with a shot of what is probably Harley's body, surrounded by multiple screens. This once again shows just how connected Harley is to everything here, but this body looks cobbled together, almost if it was made out of scraps. I wonder if Harley made this body for himself. The screens behind him don't really show much aside from the eyes, but they do form 3 big eyes together. 3 is an odd number, literally, but I wonder if there's more to that. Finally, the trailer wraps up with a reveal of the chapter name and the release date. Chapter 4 will be called Safe Haven and will, supposedly, release on the 30th of January. Thank God for that, because January is the worst month of the year for ad revenue, so February is just a tiny bit better. But that name in itself is kind of funny. Every chapter name so far has had a double meaning. A tight squeeze referring to how Huggy hugs us, but also the vent chase sequence being a tight squeeze for him. Fly in a web was a reference to a spider, but also how we were caught in a trap. Deep Sleep in Chapter 3 had several meanings, and now we have Safe Haven probably has a deeper meaning too. Obviously, Chapter 4 is not going to be a safe haven for us, and the prison was not the safe haven for the staff they thought it would be. But also, Harley's new form is kind of a safe haven for him. After all, it's a lot more difficult to kill him now that he's digital. So there we go, I hope you enjoyed the breakdown of this trailer. We didn't get any gameplay, but that's okay, it's not long now until the game will be with us. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss all of my Chapter 4 content. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.